Now, if there's one thing that will turn people against immigration, it's a sense that it's not being run in our national interest. A weekend of protests in the UK triggered by the murder of 3 young girls, but driven by unhappiness over unintegrated migrant communities, shows how badly controlled migration can strain the social fabric, even of reasonably easygoing countries like Britain. And with a new immigration minister here in Australia, one whose electorate is 55% born overseas and 25% Muslim, you've got to wonder whether immigration policy will be about what's in Australia's best interest or what's best for Tony Burke and for Labor, desperately trying to hold on to 10 or so seats with a high Muslim vote. Last Friday, the Sydney Morning Herald reported that the Albanese government would give permanent residency to the 1,300 or so Gaza residents who've come here since October 7 and to the 1,000 more who've been granted visas but are yet to arrive. Now, this is despite polls that show about 65% of Gazans support Hamas, and about that much think the October 7 rapes, killings and hostage takings were justified. And even though there's no consulate in the war zone to security check any of these people, Labor sources are citing has precedent the Abbott government's 2015 decision to admit 12,500 refugees from the then-Syrian war zone. But the facts then, and I know them well, I was there, were very different. Under Abbott, the government was explicit about preferencing persecuted minorities, people selected by our own Australian officials, not the UN, and not people who would likely bring to Australia the troubles of their homeland. Now, of those who came back then, 90% were Christian or Yazidi, and they were all properly security checked by our officials on the ground, something that is not happening with those arriving from Gaza. With Tony Burke as minister, the worry is it will import more of the world's hatreds, especially with the pressure on Labor from the Greens and Islamist activists to bring more and more Gazans to Australia. Now, I get that we can't send people back to a war zone. That would breach our international obligations. But if Gazans can't go back just yet, don't give them a permanent visa. Let's just renew their temporary visas. We could easily do that rather than take a long-term risk on social cohesion or Australia's security, especially today, given the risk of a terror attack in this country has been raised from possible to probable.